Hi there, this is Jeanette for Whimsy Stamps. Today's card is a sweet card that you could give to a young child or you could give to parents of a new baby. It features this sweet little cow jumping over the moon, the beautiful background paper, and the sentiment. And guess what? They're all digital images. So I took the images, the paper, the sentiment, loaded them up into my photo editing software on my computer, sized everything how I wanted them, placed them where I wanted them, and I just printed it off onto paper, Nina cardstock, using my Epson artisan printer. And so the beauty of this is you can see here I printed it 5 by 5, but you could print it larger, certainly 6 by 6, 8 by 8, 10 by 10, and then you could frame it. So the versatility of digital products is amazing. So I'm coloring everything up with my Copic markers, and I listed the colors that I used. You'll see them sort of scrolling along the bottom of the screen as I'm using them. I wanted to create a very soft sort of baby type look for this image. So I'm using very soft pinks, not too pink, they're more flesh colored. I'm coloring up the ears and the nose, the snout, and the udders using those colors. And I don't have any problem with any bleeding really when I'm using Copics on printed images. As I said, I use an Epson artisan printer. I get a lot of questions about that, so that's what I use. Here I'm going to be working on, the body of the cow. So I'm adding some color where I want my shadows to be, where all the folds would be. And you can see I'm not adding a whole lot. I'm really sort of outlining where the shadows are going to be. And you want to do this step before you color like the spots, because I'm going to be blending this all out with the blender pen. So that's 0, the colorless blender. So you can see here now I'm blending out that color, sort of working it outwards with the blender pen. So I'm actually just using that one color to color the main body of the cow. Once everything is nicely blended, I will go back in with that original color and deepen up some of the shadows. So just anything that got a little too diffuse, I'm going to be adding a little bit more color there and then just sort of tapping it with my blender pen. Now the reason you want to do this before you color the spots is because the blender pen will make the pigment or the color sort of migrate. And if you get some of that near the spots, well then the color in the spots might start migrating outside the spots. So you always sort of do this step before you do anything like darker so that you don't run into any problems. So you can see how it just is a very light sort of diffuse shading. It keeps the image sort of whimsical and soft. And now I'll be working on my spots. So I'm just using these 3 colors. They blend beautifully together, and it is a very sort of neutral brown color. I didn't want it too sort of pinky or too cool, so this was actually the perfect combination for the spots. And if you get a little bit of the color outside of the spots, which can happen sometimes, just use your colorless blender to sort of tap that color back into the spot. So I'm just continuing doing the same thing. If I get anything outside of where I need it to be, I use my colorless blender. We'll be doing a couple more spots to share how I do it, and then I'll move on to how I colored the rest of the image. I color all the spots the same way. I'm keeping my darker sort of shading towards, as we're looking at this, to the lower left side, and keeping the highlight to the upper right side. So I'm just finishing off this last spot. I'm going to be adding now some sort of, hair to this part and to the tail. I'm using a different technique. I'm using the same marker colors, but I am sort of stroking in strands of hair. So I put the first color rather down, and I'm going to let that dry. While it's drying, I'm moving on to the cool grays that I'm using for the hooves. And I'll do 2 of them, blend them all up, and then I can go back into the hair area and add the next color. This way the color has time to dry and it won't sort of blend into each other. Like if you colored right away over top your strokes, they would just all blend together because they're wet. So what I like to do is let them sort of dry in between. I move on to another area. Here I'm going to move on to the other 2 hooves, do those, and in the time that I'm doing those, the area with the hair will have dried. So again, I am sort of making sure that there is some contrast, there's some shadows, and some highlights in the hooves. I'm going to use that final color, the darkest color now, to really add some darker strands and give it some contrast and make it look more realistic. And you can still see that there are still sort of white areas that I didn't color over. I'll be coloring the moon and the bell using the same colors, with the exception of the gray that I'll be adding to sort of the craters of the moon. I won't be adding any gray to the bell, but other than that, the colors are exactly the same. I like when I'm coloring an image like this to not have too many different sort of colors going on. This keeps the whole picture sort of uniform and sweet and light. And because of that, I decided to color the bow just a deeper shade of what I used to color the snout of the cow. So just deeper shades of that color will be enough of a difference, I think, to make it look different, make it look not exactly the same, but in the same way, it doesn't add like another sort of color onto the card. So I wanted to keep it nice and soft, and doing this, I think, gave me the look I wanted. So you can see I'm just blending everything, and while it is the same color, it's darker and deeper and reads a little bit different. This darker color is a little bit more orange, so I think it's enough of a difference. Then I just added this color, this E43, to just all the areas that were still sort of white, and that finishes up the coloration of the cow. I'm going to go in with a white Sharpie and just add some polka dots to that bow, and again that just gives another little detail that differentiates it from the snout and the ears. Then for the clouds here, I felt that they needed to have a little bit of shading. They were just too stark, so I'm adding grays and just blending them out, and so that it softens up the clouds so that they don't look so I guess like stark against everything else. I'm going to use my multi Copic liner just to deepen up the eyes, and then I did take a gray marker and go around the image of the cow. This just makes it pop off the page a little bit and makes it look less two-dimensional and more three-dimensional. And then I'll just blend out that color with my blender pen. I'm going to trim this down. This measures 5 by 5, and I'll cut a mat using this brown cardstock to measure 5 1/4 square. I'll just adhere that down to the mat, and this just gives a nice little contrast, a little extra detail before I put it onto the white card. You can see it really makes the whole thing pop. I was trying to decide which enamel dots I wanted, and I ended up going with these sparkly ones. These were released, I think, around Christmas time, and I decided I needed a little sparkle. This was actually the sky, and so a little sparkle was in order, so I just scattered them, different colors, different sizes, all around my card. And then I decided for a little bit more detail, a little bit more sort of texture, I would add some white dots with the Sharpie pen. And this really, it's such a small step, but it really brings everything to life. So that's my card done. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this card using digital images. I encourage you to try out some digital images. They're so much fun to work with, and the possibilities are endless. For a full list of products that I used, the links, you can find those below this video on YouTube or my blog. Thanks for watching.